Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, that old adage of too big to fail simply does not exist, boys and girls. With a lot of the major studios and a lot of these other kind of corporations out there deciding to go down the path of DEI and we can hire all of these insane people to run their companies, well, it turns out it actually will drive them all the way into the ground because, boys and girls, Hasbro, after several attempts at becoming box office gold, have turned into nothing more than box office disappointments, is now officially done with the movie industry, boys and girls. They will not be financing movies any longer. They are out of money, and guess what? Their toys, the likes of Marvel and Star Wars, and as well as Dungeons and Dragons and everything else involved in D&D, is not selling either, ladies and gentlemen, and they are in a bad spot, and it is all because of all of you wonderful fans out there who have tuned out of all of their nonsense and will not put up with their BS and continue to buy their products. So we've got this wonderful article over here from cosmicbook.news. Hasbro done with movies, pivoting to G.I. Joe, Dungeons and Dragons, video games, and Magic the Gathering. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, those are the only things that sell, apparently, in any way, shape, or form. And obviously, after the success of Baldur's Gate 3, should that surprise anybody at all that they're going to go forward with this? And obviously, the G.I. Joe comics are doing really well right now, too. I've been reading them. A lot of the people I know have been reading them, and they're all loving them. And they're also doing really well at your local comic book shop as well. So, yes, this absolutely makes sense. But at the end of the day, boys and girls, this is because of Star Wars and Marvel and the bad state that they have been over the last few years, and well, the continued bad state of Star Wars that will probably go on into perpetuity, but also because of the fact that all of their stuff and all of their controversy with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons and all of that kind of stuff has not done them any favors either. They admit in their own reports, boys and girls, that consumer products, i.e. the stuff you buy from them based on the intellectual properties that they own, is not selling, and that is a glorious thing because guess what? They have done this to themselves just like so many of these other corporations have, and now they're getting exactly what they deserve. So we're going to share this article from cosmicbook.news and our dear sweet Matt McGloin. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. When was the last time you bought anything from Hasbro out there? Are you completely and fully boycotted the entire company, or are you one of those out there that is kind of pick and choose the kind of different things that you get from them? Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links in the description as well. So from cosmicbook.news and our dear sweet Matt McGloin. In a new report, it's learned that Hasbro is moving away from concentrating on movies and is now going to focus on the digital route, which includes new video games for G.I. Joe and Dungeons and Dragons. Hasbro will also be further expanding its popular Magic brand. And it was funny too, because I was actually on a show Friday night over 32 Flavors of Nick Weiser's channel. Go check his stuff out. We do a comic shop talk over there on Friday nights. It's a great little show, Clobby's Clubhouse. And one of my boys in there is Pablo, who works for Midnight's Edge. He actually says that that's one of the things that you can tell if an economy is starting to turn around or not, and the Magic the Gathering card sales have actually been going up. Now, obviously, I'm not a big fan of the Magic the Gathering stuff. I played it back in the day, but because of all their nonsense with like Aragorn and everything else, it wasn't really something that I was going to really jump back into. I've got a couple of decks. I played a few times, but it's just not something. But he's super addicted to it. He absolutely loves Magic the Gathering. He's a huge fan of it, and he said that the sales have actually surprisingly been going up for the Magic the Gathering cards. Now, obviously, this could be a lot to do with the fact that they've had like all of these other lines and all of these wonderful like little Doctor Who stuff and all of that other kind of stuff, which obviously for collectors out there, they're going to come in and buy that stuff, but they're generally not reoccurring people. So we'll see how this actually ends up working out for them, whether they can bring actual legitimate players back or if it's just going to be more constant, nonstop branding and bringing in different IPs and making special editions. We'll see what happens. Movies not a success. Following the box office disappointment of Transformers 1 and Dungeons and Dragons Den of Thieves, which obviously Den of Thieves turned out to be nothing more than a marketing disaster because they were like, yeah, it's woke, 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 woke. And then actually I had friends of mine that went and saw the movie that said it was actually really enjoyable. They actually really liked it and it didn't have any of that kind of nonsense in it. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The marketing had already gone down that path. And guess what? The movie blew up in your face. And yeah, Transformers 1 saw that one coming from a mile away. And yes, it did end up losing money just like Dungeons and Dragons Den of Thieves did. Hasbro's made the decision to not finance any of its IPs that make it to films. Hasbro recently sold off most of its film and TV business. Hasbro co-financed the films with Paramount. Various studios will continue to make movies based on Hasbro brands, but Hasbro won't be co-financing them, which means they're also not going to take a cut of they won't really take much of a cut of the profits in any way, shape, or form. They're basically just licensing out their IPs and having absolutely nothing else to do with it, which in some cases might actually give us good quality movies based on their brands, but we'll see what happens. Consumer Products Division expected to fall again. While the report doesn't mention it, where the mention is that Hasbro also puts out the merchandise and toys for Marvel and Star Wars, also all the Dungeons & Dragons stuff. But those don't seem to have made a dent in Hasbro's bottom line. Both Marvel and Star Wars have been suffering due to their questionable content. The report from Bloomberg offers that Hasbro saw a big success during the pandemic as everyone's at home buying stuff. However, now that the kids are back in school and everything is back to normal, the boom has faded. And that happened to a lot of companies out there. It's really not surprising. And the fact that everybody was betting on that to continue and using all this stuff to reinvest and go bigger and bigger and crazier was just like really, really stupid. And a lot of companies have suffered for it. And some of them have gone completely out of business because of it as well. Details in the report include sales in the company's consumer products division, again, Marvel and Star Wars does not get mentioned, are expected to fall for the third straight year. Things are apparently so bad, the company's had to lay off over 1,000 employees and is considering moving its headquarters out of a longtime home in Pawtucket, Rhode Island to Boston, because obviously Massachusetts got some really good corporation deals for all of that kind of stuff and tax breaks and all that kind of stuff, so it would end up saving them money. But literally, this shows you how bad of a state Hasbro is actually in. 1 to 2 video games a year. So with consumer products and movie side of things not doing well, Hasbro is going to focus on what it says it has been doing well. Digital. Hasbro says its popular Monopoly Go game is going to bring in over $100 million this year. I've played it. My wife's played it. It's just kind of a little tap game. It's really honestly just something that kind of distracts you. There's really not a lot of logic to it, but apparently it's doing well, and apparently it's addicting enough for them to make $100 million off of it. Holy cow. Which one of you is spending money on Monopoly Go out there? Come on, boys and girls. Likewise, Hasbro owns Baldur's Gate 3 through owning Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons, which brought in nearly $100 million in its first 6 months. And obviously, all of that is what's keeping Dungeons & Dragons afloat. It's certainly not the actual game, the tabletop role-playing game that a lot of people have tuned out and basically just use its system to do their own homebrew stories as well. The head of Hasbro adds that they want to make more games and are shelling out $100 million to $150 million a year for future projects as they want to release 1 to 2 video games a year by 2026. Those future video games projects includes Exodus from Baldur's Gate's developer BioWare, a new dungeon. Well, if it's the same team that did Baldur's Gate, it'll probably end up doing really well for them. We'll see what ends up happening for that one. A new Dungeons & Dragons video game that hasn't been previously announced. An action-adventure game based on G.I. Joe is currently in pre-production, which, like I said, G.I. Joe's in a great spot right now. The comics are wonderful. Highly recommend go checking them out. They're doing good stuff with those. Hasbro is testing a video game version of Magic the Gathering Commander. And then, of course, Hasbro also owns Magic the Gathering, obviously the game, which is huge. The report says sales nearly doubled to $1.4 billion between 2019 and 2023. Hasbro also launched an online version, digital, called Magic the Gathering Arena. I've seen several people play it. I've seen people stream this game in the past. It's not surprising that that's doing well as well. In addition, Hasbro is expanding the brand with cards set for the Lord of the Rings, Marvel, Spider-Man, and others. Yes, the Black Aragorn. I'm sure that's going to go over really well, won't it, boys and girls? In addition to Arena, Hasbro's been testing a video game version of Magic the Gathering Commander, which is set to be separate from Arena and will allow for more than 2 players to compete. It further says that similar to its Marvel Snap game, Hasbro wants to make its digital Magic cards more collectible. So spend more money on our digital stuff that you don't actually own, because we're all addicted to this kind of craziness, corporate consumer attitude stuff. I don't know, boys and girls, but it's good to know that Hasbro is at least suffering the consequences for their own actions. They have decided to go down the DEI path time and time again with a lot of their different properties, whether it be the kind of stuff we've seen with Dungeons & Dragons, whether it's the kind of stuff we've seen with Magic the Gathering, or the kind of relationships that they've had with Star Wars and Marvel, which obviously we've seen them all go down that DEI same path as well, and we've seen that it's completely and totally blown up in their faces. These corporations have lost billions of dollars because they decided to worship at the altar of this cult that promised them all of these new people and all of these new audiences, this modern audience that, guess what, everybody's found out doesn't exist. And Hasbro's suffering the consequences. They're officially done with movies. They're not going to bother. They don't have the money for it anymore. They're broke. Is Hasbro going to go bankrupt anytime soon? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, they have suffered the consequences for their own actions. They have lost billions of dollars, and it's blown up in their faces so bad that they can no longer afford to even co-finance movies, which would in turn actually bring them in a profit of the box office sales. But guess what? Those box office sales aren't there. Hasbro doesn't have the money, and it's exactly what they deserve, ladies and gentlemen.